During my first ever bulk, all I cared about was building a bigger and more muscular body. I didn't care about my health or my fitness level as a whole. But now, after going through these mistakes myself, I'm now wiser and I've learned how to bulk much more effectively with minimal fat gain. So today, we're going to go through 5 areas that can really break or make a successful bulk. So if you've been training for a while, you will notice that you're going to have some areas that are weaker than others because some parts of our body naturally gain muscle easier than others. So what you need to do in these situations is build and tailor a routine to bring up these weaker areas. So for example, if you have a very good back but a very weak chest, there's no point you training back and chest the exact same amount. You should ideally tailor back some of the exercises and make sure you leave more room to hit this weaker area, especially if it's visually apparent. But before you go forward, what you need to do is definitely have it co-signed by either a gym buddy or someone that can critically look at your physique. This is because we're often our own worst enemy. There's many times when each of us see an area of our physique that we just think is terrible when someone else thinks it looks fine. So the whole point of this is because you don't want to waste time focus on an area that realistically isn't even your weak point, but you think it is. Next up is definitely one that's going to relate to many people, which is one of the hardest struggles out there for many people when it comes to bulking, and that is struggling to eat enough food to reach your calorie surplus because they just feel like they cannot gain weight no matter what they try because they just get stuffed and they can't eat anymore. So in this instance, I've got 3 mini things that you can kind of follow trying to get past this. So number 1 is don't go over the top and try aim for a super high calorie surplus that isn't really needed for you. And this happens so frequently. I think it comes down to watching other influencers online like Chris Bumstead, and you'll hear that they're eating 4,000 calories, but then yourself at like 5'8", you think you have to eat that much so you can pack on size to look like them. That's not what you need to do. If you eat 2,300 calories, a surplus for you is anything past that. So a nice goal for you would be, say, a 300 to 500 calorie surplus. So eat at least 2,600 calories. The main goal is eat more than what you currently have consistently. Don't think you need to go leap bounds and ahead and try and eat a Mr. Olympia diet, because all that's going to happen if you actually manage to reach that high calorie goal is that you're just going to gain fat way too easily and look sloppy. Next, you need to make sure that you're not getting full too easy by eating high volume foods. Those sort of meals are more for when you're cutting, because high voluminous foods that are full of protein are great when you're cutting, because in those instances you want to feel full because you don't want to overeat. Whereas when you're doing the other end, you don't want to do that. You want to have high calorie dense meals that are also high protein. You need to make sure the foods you're eating make it easier for you to gain that calorie surplus without being too full. For example, a simple meal swap, cod. Cod is a very low calorie, high protein fish. I typically always eat this when I'm cutting down because it's filling, it's low calorie, I can eat a lot of it and I'm still not getting a lot of calories. Whereas if I'm transitioning into a bulk, I won't eat cod, I'll eat salmon because salmon has way more calories. So with these food swaps, you'll soon see that you could technically eat less of it and still end up having more calories for that meal, just because they're much more calorie dense meal options. And the third mini tip is do not use the cheat code and just resort to eating non-stop, just junk foods, takeaways, snacks, things that aren't very high protein at all. Don't be one of those people that just ends up using bulking as an excuse to eat every and anything that they see in sight. This is not the best method. This is more leaning towards a dirty bulk, which I've got videos on saying why not to do those, because there are quite a lot of side effects, especially when it comes to when you want to lean back down and look back muscular. So I definitely would say, even though you can mix in some of these foods, because on a bulk, it hasn't got to be boring foods all the time, like your chicken, broccoli, and rices. You can definitely end up being more freer, but don't make that the bulk of your meals. But yeah, don't make that the majority of the foods that you eat. Definitely make sure your main diet is still fairly high protein and just add a little bit of fun in when you can. Next, we all know of someone that when they start bulking, they have the idea that they need to change their entire training routine simply because they're now bulking, which isn't necessary. At the end of the day, as long as you're aiming to lift heavier while in this surplus, you're going to make actual gains and progress. So don't think that you need to overthink every single thing. Overthinking is the enemy of progress. I would say if you're a beginner or it's your first bulk, follow the same routine you have right now and just aim to progress. Now, if you're someone that's been lifting a while, then you may have weaker areas, so it may be better to fine-tune the routine to make sure it's bringing up the weaker points on your body, but only if that's the case. If you're a newbie at this point, you want to build a nice proportion aesthetic physique, you can still follow the same training routine as when you was maintaining or cutting. The main difference should be is the fact that you just want to progress in the lifts a little bit better. So for example, say you're doing a bench press now, doing, I don't know, 70 kg. If 2 months into your bulk, you're still benching 70 kg, something's gone wrong. Next, this one, I'm not going to say it's the most important, but I do think you will definitely regret this one if you don't actually practice it. And that is simply avoiding cardio throughout your whole bulk. I know many think that when I'm bulking, obviously if I do cardio, it's just going to make the bulk even harder. Technically, yes, if you're doing like marathon runs, but I'm just saying you want to stay relatively active. You haven't got to do heaps of cardio, but you want to make sure your body still stays fairly fit and active. When I did my dirty bulk and I avoided cardio, it was the hardest mission to get the weight off. So I highly recommend at least a few times a week doing cardio that requires you to move a little bit more explosive. I wouldn't just do like treadmill at a walking pace. I don't think that's enough. Something like the rower or the stepper machine or the cross trainer or the bicycle, something that requires you to have a lot more VO2 work, because those sort of cardio is more than just like a standard treadmill. Allow you to kind of work on your breathing, because when you get back to doing cardio again after the bulk, trust me, you're going to want to be moving a lot more. And just to give you an extra cherry on top as to why to do it, doing cardio throughout a bulk often does leave people with a better body composition. It helps maintain the surplus so you don't go too high. And also naturally, something about when you're training and consistently being active and moving your body more, I have just found that my body composition looks better. When I just sit on my ass and just train, even if I'm in a calorie surplus, I feel like the end result of my physique doesn't look as good as when I've been active throughout the whole journey. Now for the most important and easier said than done, and that is managing the fat gain throughout the journey. Initially, most times you will start gaining weight a little bit fast. So in the first 2-3 weeks, it's kind of hard to manage it. You need to kind of gauge it after probably week 3, because you may find the very first week or second week, you may gain like 1, 2, 3, 4 pounds, just because going into the surplus, your body might tend to hold a little bit more water weight due to some of the foods you're eating now. So I definitely would say if after week 3, you're starting to gain like a pound every single week, that is too much. Reel it back a bit, because gaining a pound every single week, that means literally within 10 weeks, that's 10 pounds heavy. You're going to notice a big difference in your body with 10 pounds that fast. It should be a much more gradual approach. Ideally, no more than like half a pound every single week, because that allows you to kind of have a much more steady process. Because if you're gaining a pound every single week, you must know that's not going to be mostly muscle, because muscle doesn't grow that fast. Because the worst thing you want to do is after like 8 weeks of being in your bulk already feel completely sloppy and flabby, simply because you let it go way too far. And the best way to track this fat gain is literally progress photos and the scale, because even though I do value progress photos over the scale will at least help you identify, especially when you're in a calorie surplus more than deficit, if you're going too much. Because even if the visuals somewhat look the same at first, the scale won't be able to tell you very fast if you're gaining weight way too quick. Because sometimes when it comes to gaining weight and when you're in a bulk, you don't really notice it straight away. You may notice the first couple weeks, but after that, it's not until like you're almost too far before you really have a handle on it. So definitely monitor the scale like I mentioned. And in regards to progress photos, I would say once every 2 weeks, stand in the same spot, same position, same flexing, unflex, and really compare the photos. If they're still looking somewhat the same, that's a good thing. You want to almost be in a position where your progress photos almost look the same as when you started, simply because as you're bulking, you're going to lose definition, which is going to make you a little bit smaller. But the closer you can still look to the original photo is the best you're going to look at the very end, in the event that you're a natural lifter anyway. If you're someone on steroids or something, then you're probably going to drastically look bigger and bigger and potentially more vascular as well as you get a little bit more heavier into your supplements. But for natural lifters, ideally, if you can almost look as almost relatively close in composition to when you started, when you finally trim off that fat, you're going to look much more vascular, much more bigger than when you first started. So definitely try and consider that. Don't think that you need to look in your bulk drastically beast level huger than the original, because for natural lifters, not really going to be that case. You just want to make sure that you're not looking fluffy and fat. But for those of you out there that are considering bulk and you want to get more of a guideline as what to do, be sure to check out this video here where I go in detail on it. It will teach you how to make gains while staying as lean as possible.